SWAC talk, light on the mic, it's a play. See Wells the guy taking us state to state. Catch us Wednesday, Sunday, stats on the buffet. From Grand Darren to the court, we got the say. Football spirals, hoop dreams in the chat. Chopping it up, deep dives on every stat. Texas to Florida, repping border to border. Arkansas to Bama, the vibe getting warmer. SWAC talk, keep the knowledge on deck. See Wells spinning wisdom, gotta show respect. Facts flying higher than a wide receiver's check. From football to hoops, what y'all expect? Guests roll through, dropping stories untold. Legends from the SWAC, spitting straight gold. Locker room vibe, secrets unfold. CW heavy like a championship hold. The South's got a rhythm, a culture to match. Each stat, each fact, another door latch. SWAC talk connects like a perfect pass catch. From Alabama skies to Florida's grass patch. SWAC talk, keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive. Keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. Of course, I am your tour guide around the SWAC. C. Wells coming at you, and we're just gonna chop it up a little bit, man, about this game that's been moved. I mean, it's not really a big thing, but we like to talk about things when they come across. So I decided I want to share my thoughts on it. But with that being said, man, y'all check out those socials: Facebook is SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76, Instagram SWAC Talk. Don't forget to like the video, comment, and share your thoughts. Hit that notification bell to be alerted to anytime videos drop. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. As I said, before, I'm going to keep saying it just so I don't let it slide. We're doing SWAC Smoke every other Thursday now up until Media Day. So we won't have SWAC Smoke this week, but SWAC Smoke will be back next week. We're working on a couple other things to drop. The homie Jerome gonna have a show that we're gonna drop in a couple weeks, so y'all keep it locked here for that. And I got a couple other things I'm gonna drop as things come around. So with that being said, man, let's go ahead and jump into this. FAMU and Valley moved their home game to Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Rattlers and Delta Devils facing off. So that to me is an interesting thing, and we're going to get into it in a minute. Of course, we know last season what happened, when FAMU and Valley hooked up. So to me, I think a lot of the intrigue or attention that this game is getting is from a lot of people outside of both schools who are basically checking it, are basically into it because of what happened last year and the memes and everything that came off of it. So to me, it's more intrigue for that and not necessarily for the game, because these two teams have faced off since 2021, since FAMU been in the SWAC, and Rattlers won every year except for last season, which that is one of those things. So Valley has already moved. I think they moved one of their home games already this past season. So this is looking like it's gonna, at least for this season, gonna be a trend. Where is it? They moved. The Alabama State game is being played in Mobile as well. I want to make sure that is a home game for them. Last season they played at Bama State, so yeah, this season that's a home game. So they moved two of their home games to neutral sites, and of course, money is a factor in any of these situations, and so I kind of want to say, I kind of want to look at it if like the title says, is this a good idea or not? So I don't really think it's a bad move per se. Um, I think I do think you got a decent home schedule anyway because you get Jackson State at home, which is pretty much the game that you sell out at your stadium. You get Alabama A&M at home, and your other home games are Texas Southern, Lincoln, and Southern. So not a bad home schedule, but not great either. So, with the exception of Jackson State being the game that's going to draw, FAMU coming up to Itabena is probably not a game that's going to draw a huge crowd, but, have an opportunity to play that team at home coming off of an upset victory, I think would work wonders for you. But when you look at some of the numbers, and an argument like this always has to come down to that. Um, this is a no lose situation. I guess you can look at it depending on how the contract works and splits and everything. I'm under assumption that Valley is going to pocket the majority of the money. This is their home game, so everything that moves is for them. So when you look at the tickets, last season Valley, their average season ticket price was $25. So I'm using that number as a baseline. I wouldn't expect tickets for this game to be much higher than that. Although being that it's in Atlanta in a nice stadium, um, you might get more asking price, but I think 25 is probably the baseline. Um, if they if they get 25 grand at this game in terms of crowd, 25K, you're looking at bringing in $625,000 just strictly off of ticket sales. I mean, of course, there is expenses and everything, but I'm assuming they're going to get a share of the parking and maybe a share of concessions. So you looking at being able to possibly bring in 750, 800,000 on a game like this. That again, that's before expenses. I'm not quite sure what their expenses would average out to in a situation like this. But being that they don't play, that they don't have FBS money games, this is that for them. So if the same situation is at play for the Mobile game, then you're looking at possibly clearing over $1 million before expenses for two games that you move, and that's multiple times more than you would make at home for those two games. So um, that would be, monetarily, that would be tremendous. Now I'm looking at the Bama State game as the Port City Classic, so I don't know if that's gonna, I don't know how the money's gonna check out on that one, but um, just having this game, move to Atlanta, I think, it's great. It gives Valley a chance to play, on a neutral site in an NFL stadium, which is something that they don't do very often. I know they had games in Chicago from time to time, but they don't really play a lot of neutral site games. So that's great for them. And it's also a win for FAMU because it gives them an opportunity to play in Atlanta, which is somewhere where they played historically for a long time. So if you look at, just looking at some of the numbers again, Valley has had two neutral site games in the last 4 or 5 seasons. They played in Chicago in 2023 against Central State. That was a season opening game. That game drew about 21,000 people. And then in 2021, they played Southern in Jackson on a Sunday. That crowd was very light. I was at that game. It was hot as hell, but it was a very light attended game. About 10,000 people there, which is a little bit more than the attendance of Rice Titan Stadium. So, by all intents and purposes, this game probably could have been played in Edobina, and not had too much of an overflow. Um, you probably subtract 1,000 or 1,500 people from that, and you're probably looking at eight and a half or 9,000 people at a game between those two teams in Itabena. So that's a mixed bag. And then when you look at this matchup, these two teams have played 4 times since FAMU joined the SWAC in 2021. They played at Valley. It had a crowd of 2,700. They went to Tallahassee in 2022, had 10,699, and then they back in Urbana in 2023, they drew Um, they drew 1,689 people. And then last season for the game in Tallahassee, it was 12,485. So, FAMU's going to do the bulk of the heavy lifting in this game when it comes to attendance. And I think most people understand that. I don't really think Valley's worried about crowd or attendance. So, anything that they get, if a ton of rattlers show up, that's still money in their pocket. So, you're looking at for FAMU, this is, their third straight game in Atlanta. You had the Celebration Bowl in 2023, and then last year you had the Mid-SWAC Challenge. So 3 straight years playing in Atlanta. After playing there, um, basically, as far as I can tell, basically playing there. Um, 17 games in like 18 or 19 years, going back to like 1995 to play Southern twice there. Then they had the Atlanta Football Classic against Tennessee State and Southern, um, running from the late 90s to 2012. So this is a place that FAMU has historically drawn well. I mean, when you look at the average attendance over that time span in that time playing in Atlanta, over 50,000 people. And so that's the bulk of that is FAMU people. They got a huge alumni base in FAMU, got a huge, Tallahassee ain't that far. So, you have an opportunity to go see your team play and, in your eyes, get some revenge for a matchup that probably should not have gone against you. But to me, when I first heard this, I was honestly like, why? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm not a fan of moving home games, unless something good comes out of it. Especially when you're in a situation like that, where you want to have as much of a home field as you can, and you want to give your crowd an opportunity to come and see your team play. Which obviously, Valley has a decent amount of home games this season, so you know they're able to have some wiggle room. They got um, after moving this game, they have 4 home games, which they would have had 5 or 6 when you look back at the Bama State game, which is the most home games I've seen Valley have in a long time. So moving those and dropping down to 4 is still not that bad. But I think when you're in a position that they are in, I think you need to do whatever you can to shake things up. If this was anybody else, I probably wouldn't really be a fan of this move, but when you don't have anything to lose, you got to do what you got to do. And when you look at it from the monetary tip, um, it probably works out better for them. You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't have all the exact numbers and everything, and I don't know how they're gonna be charged in terms of using the stadium and all of that kind of stuff. But they should, as long as they have a decent crowd, they should clear a decent amount of money for this, which would make it worth it. If this game does not draw well, then it's a huge loss for Valley because you could have drawn. I'm not saying this game is going to draw 10K, but you could have drawn close to that, or even whatever 5K at home and keep all the money. Then to have to go to Atlanta and don't draw over 25K. So um, I'm all like I said, I'm all for it. I really did this video with the idea that I was gonna be against this. The more I looked at it from that side of things, it works out well. I'm gonna definitely be interested to see how this game turns out attendance wise because yes, it's not that huge of a deal, but still I don't like to see an empty stadium that big. You know what I'm saying? So um, it's gonna be a tough task. I mean, Valley's gonna have to pull some weight. I think they really, like I said, counting on FAMU to do a lot of heavy lifting, and FAMU is gonna potentially bring a good crowd. But you know, if that's the case, you probably should have worked out something to play the game back in Tallahassee again if you want to play in front of a bunch of orange and green people and not care about your people. But maybe Valley turns out, maybe they surprise me and they turn out, everybody like to take a trip to ATL, so maybe they turn out. I mean, they turn out pretty decent in Chicago, so maybe they do the same here. But I look at it and this is a relatively early game in the season. This is only the fifth game of the season. So by that point, who knows where this team is at? They got a new coach. You're looking for new energy. I really hope moving forward that they don't move two home games every year. Moving one here or there sporadically, I think is fine. Even though you're not having a big crowd, you still want to give your people an opportunity to come and see your team play without having to spend money on travel to do it. Although being that Valley is not a big school, I'm sure they have a lot of people that have to travel there for games anyway. So I guess it's six and one half dozen the other. It is what it is. But I think that this is a good move. Like I said, I was honestly all set to be like, nah, this is not a good move. I'm not saying it's a great move. I'm not over the moon about it, but I understand it, and that makes it a good move for them. In terms of me, I still would rather a home game. Like I said, I'm just not a fan of moving home games. Any game that is at a neutral site would probably already have been there. Um, and like I said, if you're the road team, it's really nothing that you got to lose. I mean, I would honestly still, if you're moving a game, I still want a cut of it. I mean, we're gonna be playing in Atlanta, and possibility of making some decent money. I would like my hands in that pot too, but that is that is what it is in that instance. Again, FAMU, if they don't have to, they don't get a cut or anything, they still don't have to do more than spend what they were going to spend to go to Albino. So it's a more attractive trip for FAMU and their fans. I think that's what makes this a win-win for the Rattlers. You get a trip to Atlanta for the third year in a row, and possibly, things go your way. Maybe this is the first stop in Atlanta, and you get another one later. But that there's nothing egregious about this move. Like I said, when I first heard it, I really was like, why. I still have that little bit of why, but at this point, I think looking at some of the numbers and everything like that, and trying to pull some things together and doing some mental gymnastics, I think I could make myself, kind of buy into it a little bit. And I'm definitely gonna be interested in this game. Hopefully it gets SWAC Digital Network or something, pick it up, HBCU Go or something. Um, give it as much as you can, what I'm saying, to increase the interest in this game. I don't want it to be, a game that falls by the wayside and nobody really, talks about it because it's FAMU and Valley, which, like I said, if last year didn't happen, this would not even be a conversation whether if this game got moved because there really wouldn't be a lot of intrigue in this game. But a lot of people, have intrigue in this game because they want to be able to, throw those memes at FAMU and everything. So in that aspect, I think the attention is there. And like I said, it's just gonna be interesting to see, where this goes and how this goes because you're taking a team that averaged 3,100 people per game last season, and you're putting them on the road. Um, where they typically don't travel well. So I think I do think the allure of being in Atlanta may sway a few Delta Devils to come through, but this is FAMU's game basically. They should probably wear their home colors because I think they're gonna have all the edges anyway, and the most they want to have they get back. So I think this is more of a FAMU game than a Valley game. I would say this is a good idea, but wrong opponent. I think FAMU should play in Atlanta pretty much all the time. I mean, they have before, they should now. I think a different opponent would definitely spike those numbers a lot more, but it's not their call. So although I would just love to, I would have loved to be in the room or on the phone when Valley, was able to strike this up. Because I mean, like you feel like maybe you could have moved this game. Maybe they could have played a neutral site game in Jackson. But or they got to go out of state, maybe Birmingham or something. But Atlanta is great for everybody involved. So all in all, I think that this is a good idea. Like I said, I've been waiting to see more about the actual game, but all in all, I think this is a good move. So to answer my question, it's a good move, a good idea, and we'll just see how it plays out. So with that being said, man, I'm the tour guide around the SWAC Seawells. signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.